Let's talk about one of the 20th century's most chilling and genuinely unsolved mysteries. We're going back to 1959, to a desolate mountain in the Soviet Union, where 9 experienced hikers died in just the most bizarre way you can imagine. They fled their only shelter, ran out into a frozen wasteland, and what searchers found weeks later has just baffled investigators for over 60 years. So today, we're going to try to piece together the chilling facts to understand what really happened on Death Mountain.
This, right here, is the question at the absolute heart of the entire mystery. I mean, just picture it. You're safe, you're warm in your tent on a brutally cold winter night. What kind of terror would it possibly take to make you slice that tent open from the inside and just run with no shoes, no coat, into the freezing darkness? What could possibly do that?
And this is the scene that greeted the search party weeks later. A single, abandoned tent on this empty slope. It was slashed open, sure, but from the inside, as if the people in there were desperate to escape their only shelter. And inside, all their gear, their warm clothing, their food, just left behind. It's the first huge contradiction in a story that's absolutely full of them. And to really get how strange this all is, we need to talk about who these people were. You know, this wasn't some group of unprepared novices. These were highly competent, expert-level winter trekkers. The group was mostly students and recent grads from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, and they were led by a 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov. These were all seasoned hikers. They were totally prepared for this kind of extreme trip. And in a wild twist of fate, one member, Yuri Yudin, actually had to turn back early because of an illness. That decision saved his life, and he was left to wonder what happened to his friends for the rest of his days. So let's quickly get grounded in the timeline here. They set out in late January of 1959. By February 1st, they make their final camp on the slope of a mountain known by the local Mansi people as Kolets-Syakhl. Ominously, that translates to Death Mountain. The tragedy is believed to have happened that very night. It would be over 3 weeks before anyone even found their abandoned tent. Okay, now we get to the evidence. And it's right here that the story goes from a simple tragedy to a deep, confounding mystery. The clues the investigators found were disturbing, and a lot of the time they just made no sense together. First, just let this number sink in for a second. It was 30 degrees below 0 Celsius. That's minus 22 Fahrenheit. And that's not even including wind chill. It's an absolute death sentence for anyone who's not properly dressed. And yet, this is the environment they ran out into. The clues at the campsite paint such a bizarre picture. So the tent's cut open from the inside. All their survival gear is left behind. You have footprints showing they fled in socks or even barefoot. But here is the critical detail. There are no other footprints. No sign of an attacker. No sign of a struggle. It was just them and their panicked flight into the deadly cold. So the first 5 bodies were found scattered down the slope, and the official cause of death was pretty simple: hypothermia. They froze to death. But even this wasn't straightforward. Some of them were found partially undressed, which is this grim thing called paradoxical undressing, where people in the final stages of freezing actually feel irrationally hot. It points to a slow, agonizing death from the elements. But that simple explanation, it was about to be completely shattered. I mean, freezing to death doesn't explain the sheer terror that made them run in the first place. And more importantly, what happened to the last 4 members of the group? Their discovery would change everything we thought we knew. 2 months later, the last 4 hikers were found in a ravine, buried under 4 meters of snow. And their injuries? They turned the entire investigation on its head. They hadn't frozen to death. They had suffered catastrophic internal trauma, crushed chests, fractured skulls, forces that doctors compared to a high-speed car crash. And yet, they had no major external wounds. One victim was missing her tongue. And, to top it all off, some of their clothing tested positive for low levels of radiation. So you've got 2 completely different scenes. One group freezes to death. The other is crushed by some kind of immense force. How on earth to explain all of that? Well, This brings us to the competing theories that have just swirled around this case for decades.
The official 1959 investigation ended with this unbelievably vague statement. The cause of death was an irresistible elemental force. What does that even mean? It explained nothing. It gave zero answers to the families. It was basically the Soviet authorities saying, "We don't know," or maybe even more chillingly, "We're not going to tell you."
And then, to make things worse, they classified the files. This secrecy was the perfect fuel for speculation. With no official answers, you had amateur investigators, journalists, and the public all trying to piece together the puzzle themselves, which led to dozens of theories, from the pretty rational to the pretty fantastic.
Okay, so let's break down the main contenders. Could it have been an avalanche? Well, that would explain the panicked flight from the tent. But the tent wasn't buried, and avalanche experts say the slope wasn't nearly steep enough for a major slide. Okay, what about a secret military weapons test? That could explain the radiation and those blast wave-like injuries. But again, why was there no debris, no shrapnel? Then there's this really intriguing idea of infrasound, a low-frequency noise from the wind that can cause irrational panic. That would definitely explain fleeing the tent, but it absolutely does not explain crushed ribs and fractured skulls. So you see, every theory seems to explain one piece of the puzzle, but none of them explains everything.
An attack was also on the table, of course. A human assault seems pretty much impossible. No extra footprints, no signs of a fight, and the local Mincy people were known to be peaceful. An animal attack? Just as unlikely. Investigators found zero animal tracks, and those internal injuries just don't match any predator known to be in the Urals. So naturally, with so many unanswered questions, you're gonna get more colorful theories. We're talking everything from UFOs to a Russian Yeti. And while these make for great stories, we have to point out that they are purely speculative. There's just no physical evidence to back them up. So why, after more than half a century, why are we still so fascinated by this story? Why does the Dyatlov Pass incident just refuse to be forgotten? Well, the case has seen a modern comeback. After decades of silence, Russian authorities actually reopened the investigation in 2019. And in 2020, they announced their official conclusion, basically reaffirming the old theory. It was an avalanche. They argue a small slab avalanche could have forced the group out and that their injuries came later when they fell into the ravine. But for so many people, including independent researchers and the victims' families, this official explanation just feels incomplete. Can a small avalanche really generate the force to crush a human chest without breaking the skin? What about the radiation or the missing tongue? The avalanche theory just leaves too many of the weirdest facts totally unexplained. Ultimately, the Dyatlov Pass mystery endures for this perfect storm of reasons. You've got young, capable people who did everything right. You have a vague, secretive official investigation that created decades of distrust. And above all, you have a set of clues that simply refuse to fit into one neat, logical explanation. It's just a powerful and humbling story about humanity facing some terrifying, unknown force. Which leaves us with the final, haunting question. We might have official answers, but we don't have the complete truth. And maybe the real story of what sent 9 experienced hikers fleeing to their deaths on that frozen mountainside will forever remain their final secret, buried under the snow.